hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for August 10th, 2018. The Premier League is back on our screens. 3 p.m. Eastern today, Manchester United versus Leicester. It all begins, and this is our annual Premier League prediction show, preview show. Good morning, Duane.
Good morning. It is Christmas Eve. I guess maybe it's actually Christmas Day, I suppose, since the weird little start to the season. But Saturday's when it really starts. Sunday for me, but Saturday is when you wake up and you're like, oh, God, it's back.
Oh, God, I got to wake up. Well, at least they're not too early tomorrow. Right? There's no 7 a.m. game, if I'm not mistaken, so it's not too bad. But, yeah, the Premier League is back, and we're going to preview. The way we do previews here is not just like go from 1 to 20. No. We have 9 questions that we're going to answer, Duane and I, and those answers will serve as our preview for the Premier League. But first of all, Duane, did you miss the Premier League over the last few months? I know we had the World Cup, so we had our England fix, especially with England's great performance. But did you miss the Premier League?
Yes and no. I normally miss it badly. I miss it badly 2 weeks after it's going. At the end of May every year, even, it's been a successful team season for my team, there's this burnout period because it's a lot. It is my favorite league in the world, period, full stop, all sports, absolutely. So I do miss it when it's gone. But this year, because there was a bit of a blip, and then immediately was into World Cup prep, and then the World Cup was just everywhere, especially because of what we were doing. It just engulfed me. So really the sprint, the off season only seemed about a month to me this year. So I missed it less this year than normally, but I will when, I'm going to pull out of work early today to watch that thing, and when that first ball is kicked in anger and I suddenly start screaming at a United player on the screen with people like slowly moving away from me at Montana's at the corner, I'll be watching at the Dixie and 401 Montana's if anyone's interested. So there you go. It'll be back and it'll be fun.
You remind me of my good old days. I used to work for Montana's from 2008 to 2010, a long time ago in another lifetime. When I used to be in Oakville.
The last game I watched in Montana was Spain-Portugal in the World Cup. So
nice.
Let's hope it's half as good as that.
All right, so here's our 9th question. I'm going to lay out the questions, and then we're going to start with number 1. Our first question is going to be the biggest story of the season, then the disappointment of the season, who's relegated, who wins the League Cup, who wins the FA Cup, who wins the European spot, so top 5 or maybe top 6 or 7, depending on our choices. Then we have the Golden Boot, the champions, and the surprise of the season. Let's start with number 1, with your biggest story of the 2018-19 Premier League season.
Well, with the risk that some people might immediately turn the podcast off because they know who's talking here, but I do think that the story of the season, and I've sort of implied this a little while ago, is not just going to be City chasing the championship, because I think pretty much everyone is calling them the favorites. Some people might pick Liverpool, some people might pick United, but most people would likely concede that Manchester City is the favorite heading into this season, the consensus favorite. But to me, I'm going to go a step further than that. The story of the season will be Manchester City chasing perfection, chasing an undefeated season. And this could end at Sunday. And then you can make fun of me on Monday if that happens, because Arsenal's a damn good team. And I when we talk later, I might have them up higher than some people, but I do think that it's going to go a step further. They got 100 points last year. What else do they have to do domestically? Really, is to match that so they can have arguments and conversations about the greatest team of all time. And this is such a difficult thing to do. I in no way I don't think they can, but I think it will be a story if it gets 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season and they still haven't lost, then people are going to start to think about it.
Yeah, it's a good one. They got close last year. If it wasn't for Liverpool, they would have maybe got that undefeated season. The biggest story of the season for me will come out from Manchester, but on the other side of the town. There's something about Jose Mourinho when it's a 3rd season in charge of a club. I've experienced it with Chelsea. We've seen it with Inter. We've seen it with Real Madrid. And now it already has begun It's going to happen in Manchester United. The third season blues for Jose Mourinho at Manchester United. The struggles they will have. They didn't get their target in the transfer season, and this is just the beginning. I do really feel that the way Mourinho manages a team can only go so far, and his lack of trust to academy players, heck, it's because of him that Chelsea doesn't have De Bruyne, Salah, and Lukaku, all right? So that's still on my shoulders. That chip still exists, and I do feel the same thing's going to happen for Manchester United. They're going to struggle. What does a struggle for Manchester United mean? Maybe 6, 7. That's enough to be a struggle, and that's enough to maybe have the fans put a lot of pressure on the club, and finally, maybe he's going to get sacked before the end of the season.
Well, we'll see. I mean, look, for Manchester United, struggle means not finishing in the European spots, in particular the Champions League spots, and that is considered a struggle. I mean, these clubs now and the money that's in the Premier League, you don't ever see a shock relegation anymore. God, that would be a dream, wouldn't it? But I mean, I'm not even talking being flippant here with the United stuff. I think most people would quite enjoy watching a very, very big club go down for a year just to see what would happen when they went down. But nonetheless, it was because most sports fans like to cheer against just as much as they like to cheer for. That's part of the beauty of it. So, but I don't think we'll ever see something like that, or even United slipping down into the bottom half of the table. But if they finish 6th or 7th, that would definitely be a cause for shakeup. I don't even think it's really realistic they could miss Europe. Europe generally is top 7. For those, real quickly, for those that don't know, and I know that a lot of people listening to this know the way the European slot, but I know not everyone does, so I'm going to quickly explain the European spots. The top 3 get automatic drops into the group stage of the Champions League. 4th place goes to the playoff. The FA Cup and the League Cup winners also get Europa League spots. However, if one of the teams that finished in the top 4 that got the Champions League spot also won the League Cup or the FA Cup, their spot would then go to the next highest finisher in the table. So I know that confuses some people. So I thought for a public service, I'd put that out there. So that's why you often see 7 teams. The top 7 often qualify for Europe, and that's. Spoiler alert, I have 7 going to Europe as well, which means I have my FA Cup and my League Cup coming from the top 4.
Yep, exactly. Same here. All right, so that's our biggest story of the season. Now, the disappointment of the 2018-2019 season, in your opinion, Duane?
Liverpool.
Oh, wow. That's bold.
Because I just think that they were too reliant on a single scorer, and they're still not strong at the back. I just don't trust Liverpool. They're all the way up, all the way down. They're an extreme version of that. We talk about the Whitecaps being that at MLS level. I mean, this is an extreme version of it, obviously better than them. But I do think that they have that quality with them that they can shoot for the top. And I mean, Liverpool, I might be completely off on this. Liverpool might, in a perfect storm, might win the title this year.
That's true.
But I think that they also, in an imperfect storm, could finish. And when I say struggle, I mean, again, spoiler alert, when I look at my 1 to 20 listing, which I have in front of me and I will publish on Twitter after this, I always do that every year, so you can save that if you want. I have them 6th, and I think that would be an immense disappointment for Liverpool fans who are all geared up that this is the season that they could compete, that they could push whoever it is, likely City, but whoever it is at the top for the title. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that, we have injuries concerns with Salah. We have still problems at the back with this club, and that's always been their weakness. And then part of the way the club plays is going to always make that something that's difficult for them to completely have a handle on. So I just think that Liverpool will be, it's not going to be disappointing by any, overall grand scheme. They're still going to be 6th on the, all of England, but for Liverpool and for where they feel they are right now, I think it's going to be a disappointment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My disappointment of the season is related to my biggest story of the season, Manchester United. I do feel there will be a lot of disappointed fans in the red part of Manchester with the lack of progression, the lack of Lukaku defining his type of play and finding the back of the net as often as fans would like him to. And I do feel that Manchester United in this transfer window has not achieved their goals. Mourinho has been really open about it. Add that to, we all know how Mourinho is when Mourinho's not happy, and it already has begun. all those things are going to add up together, and I think they might finish outside of the top 5, and that is a big disappointment. Manchester United, one of the biggest club in the entirety of sports in the world, will be struggling in the Premier League this year.
We can dream. Sorry. You know my feelings on the red versus blue, so we'll leave that well enough alone. But objectively speaking, I think that the objective argument against United is that Mourinho is just stifling the creativity in what is an immensely talented team. It's a team that relies a little too much on De Gea, and he showed that he was human at the World Cup. So if you combine that, maybe
he has one more save than I do in World Cup 2018. That's how bad a World Cup De Gea had, and you know. When you have a star player like Pogba and you make him play as a 6, you're like, come on, this guy should be higher up the field. This guy should be your creative maestro in the midfield, and it's not the case. So, yeah, my disappointment is Manchester United. Now, let's go quickly with our surprise of the season. I'll start here, Duane. You know, when you have clubs that are just being promoted last year and they stayed up and they have a new, not necessarily new owners, but owners with new money that are willing to spend, and you sign Rui Patricio and Joao Moutinho in a club like Wolves, this could have good ramifications for them. And for me, Wolves in the top 10, Wolves in the top 7 maybe, is a surprise. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if they're able to pull that off, especially with Marco Silva. Especially with the Rui Patricio and Joao Moutinho that I was talking about. Those two players will have a lot of influence, especially when they play against bottom teams. So yeah, I do feel Wolves will be the surprise of the season in the Premier League.
Yeah, and look, my surprise of the season is going to be very similar to Wolves, but not exactly the same. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about in a second here. I certainly they ripped up the championship last year, and that can't be sniffed at. And they made some impressive signings, 4 down in context in the offseason. And you're right to say that what they might have above the other teams that some people might be pegging for relegation, and any team that comes up to the championship is automatically going to be put in that relegation fight in most people's minds, is that they should be able to handle the teams that are lower around them. And look, there was a couple teams that stayed up last year that might have normally gone down, so I think that the relegation battle is going to be a little bit wider than the title race this year. There'll be probably 7 or 8 teams in that mix, and only maybe 2 or 3 in the title race. So if you're interested in races, the bottom might be more interesting for you than the top. But certainly that is an interesting pick, and one that's, as I said, very similar to mine, because mine, Kevin, is Fulham.
Yeah.
I think Fulham has made some very interesting signings and plays a very attractive style of game that I think could effectively catch a few teams off guard and could do well against the lower level sides. And I do think that they are in line to not just not be relegated, but to actually thrive in this Premier League season and have, catch some teams off guard, catch some scalps. It's a club that's always been a sort of, I don't know, sleeping giant's the wrong way to put it. Maybe sleeping mid-sized mammal.
A sleeping strongman or strong woman.
Yeah.
A sleeping pretty strong guy. But when he comes to someone a bit bigger, they get trashed. But yeah, mid-table, strong mid-table team.
Yeah, any club that's in London too has the potential to grow, in my mind. It's a beautiful part of London too, so it would be attractive to potential players, I would think. So, if they can solidify themselves in the Premier League, and for those that are relatively new to following the Premier League, you may not remember that Fulham was a long-standing member of it for many, many, many years until they slipped down a few years ago, and now they've climbed their way back up. And I think that they're in position to once again solidify themselves as an annual participant in the league.
I can finally say those 2 words again in the Premier League. Craven Cottage, the best named stadium in the Premier League.
And it's one I've been to, and it's worth going to. It's everything you'd think of when you think of an English stadium. So if you're in London, if you're in West London, don't just go to the bridge. Walk the other 2 miles and see Craven Cottage as well. It'll be worth your time.
All right, we were talking about relegation. Now it's time to answer this question. Who will be relegated in the 2018-2019 season? And I'll start, Duane, here. You were mentioning teams just being promoted usually are in the conversation, and I have 2 of those. and actually one of those and two that should have been maybe relegated last year. I'll start by my 20th spot. I'm even going to put a number on them. Cardiff in the 20th spot because, well, they haven't really kept up with the Joneses being promoted. They haven't spent that money wisely in my mind. And Cardiff is going to be one of the favorites to be relegated, the first one to be officially relegated in my mind. Then Newcastle. Why Newcastle? For the second off-season transfer window in a row, they're in the positive. They're made $25 million. And when I look at the owner, Mike Ashley, and when I look at the unhappiness of a Rafa Benitez towards what he wants to do, but not having the owner give him the funds to do so, this is a money aspect. This is a money decision. This is business decision. The sporting goods magnate in England, Mike Ashley, is having this team to make money, and this is not usually the right reason to have a sports team. You know, there's a great phrase out there to say, what's the best way to become a millionaire owning a sports team? Well, be a billionaire, buy a sports team, and then you'll be a millionaire. So there's that. But I do feel that Newcastle won't be able to keep up with other teams like Wolves and like Burnley and Brighton and teams like this that have been promoted for the last few years and were able to stay in the Premier League. I do feel Newcastle, there's going to be some unrest in the fan support. There's going to be unrest in the front offices. And this is all because of the owner, Mike Ashley. So Newcastle is my team number 18. And I do have another team that I think is going to be relegated. One that maybe should have been relegated last year. They had a horseshoe, you know where. Huddersfield. I'm sorry, Jean-Luc Picard. I'm sorry, but your team is going back to the championship too.
Consensus, Claxon. We have the same three. I slightly shifted my order. I have Cardiff at the bottom as well. I flipped Newcastle and Huddersfield. It hardly matters between those two spots, but that's what I have there. I mean, you talked about Mike Ashley, and Newcastle would be the one that shouldn't be in there based on the size and the history of that club. Newcastle should be at the very least a mid-table team, if not. Ultimately, because of their fan base and the potential of that, they shouldn't just be a mid-table team in my mind. They should be competing for European spots year after year.
They should be 8, 7, 6. That's where Newcastle was when I started to watch the Premier League, right? That's where they've usually been. The Magpies were a top 10 team almost every single year. Not the case anymore.
Yeah, look, slightly crude story that's going to relate. We're going to get your bingo cards out. I'm going to make a hockey reference here as it relates to Newcastle. There's a cemetery at Islington and Bloor that some very disgruntled Toronto Maple Leaf fans occasionally, drink at the local pubs and fill their bladder up and then walk into that cemetery and find a particular gravestone from a particular former owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then they do what they have to do. I think Mike Ashley is running a risk of having the same thing happen to his gravestone down the line because of the way he's run that club, that famous club, that very popular club into the ground. There's a lot of analogies between the Toronto Maple Leafs and Newcastle, with one exception. The Leafs are finally going in the right direction. Newcastle is still spinning its wheels or going down.
Yep, we agree on this. And Huddersfield, well,
they were lucky to stay up a year. Yeah. No one's going to complain if they go down in Huddersfield. They're going to say that was a good 2-year run. I mean, the best case scenario for a club like that would become a Stoke, right? And Stoke finally went down after several years, just staying up and kind of spinning. And in some ways, that's purgatory because they never were going to get above their standing of like 13, 14. But they, by going down now, at least Stoke can compete for a title again, and that's something for their fans to watch. But Huddersfield, I think, will be happy with their 2-year run and accept relegation with dignity, I'm pretty sure.
Speaking of relegation, I really have the feeling that the championship is going to be another great season in the championship. It's going to be amazing to follow this with great clubs, and like Leeds has a very good coach right now. Manager of Leeds is, well, of course, I had it at Bielsa. I had it at the top of the local Leeds will be really good. And I do feel that Leeds might come back in the Premier League for the first time in a long time next year, just because of the manager aspect. And they've started off well last week. But yeah, so there's that aspect. The championship will be a league that I follow a bit more closely in 2018, 2019. Now,
it's worth watching, yeah, for sure. Real quickly on that, I mean, you could have two very historic teams come up in Leeds and Aston Villa.
Yeah,
could come up next year.
Rivals,
that would be a
too.
very
finally they'll be able to face each other in the Premier League. Well, it'll be interesting. All right, Now we're starting to go through our winners in this preview show. the League Cup winner. Duane, who is your League Cup winner as of August 10th?
With apologies, Manchester City. And the reason I say that is just their depth. I have not picked them to win the treble. I'll say that right now. So it's a spoiler for the next one. But I do think that the League Cup is a competition that really there is no excuse for Manchester City to not win based on the depth of that team. It doesn't mean they're going to every year, but I do think that going into any season, because they have such incredible depth in every position, that they should be considered the favorite because they have the wherewithal to get through those early rounds, whereas that's generally where the bigger clubs get tripped up, is that they try and throw the four stringers against whatever team in the fourth tier, and they end up getting their ass bit. So I think City has the way to get through that. And once this gets deep, and normally what happens in the League Cup obviously too is no one pays attention to the semifinals unless you're in it, and then even then you're half paying attention. So yeah, I do think City will repeat and will be in line for a double, if not the double.
For me, the League Cup being one of the first significant trophy to be won in the Premier League and in English football, their Community Shield, but who cares about that plate? Sure, wings look good on that plate, but that's about it. When you think about the League Cup, for me, the Carling Cup, the Capital One Cup, whatever branding you want to spin on it, I do have the idea that a team that doesn't change too much, that has a certain amount of chemistry, that is finishing with the same type of player, starting with the same type of player they finished the year before. Spoilers alert, there's only one team that didn't make any signing, and that's the first time since the transfer window was implemented in 2003, and that's Tottenham Hotspurs. Harry Kane is going to continue on his goal-scoring run, especially in cup competitions, and I do have a feeling Tottenham Hotspurs could surprise a lot of people by winning the League Cup, because a lot of other teams won't really care because they're looking at the League and the Champions League. So for me, I do have Tottenham Hotspurs, the Spurs, winning this year's League Cup.
Yeah, and it's a fair shout. You can make an argument for any of those two teams, and it's based a lot on what I just said, and motivation too plays a big role. I mean, Arsenal's another interesting nod to it because everybody's going to want to start with a cup, right? So it's another team that might pay more attention to it than they normally did. You kind of have to look at intangibles when you're handicapping the League Cup. It's the same when we're talking about MLS when you're handicapping the U.S. Open Cup, and who would have predicted that final?
Philly versus Houston. The battles of the unloved. The battle of the, we haven't made it there ever. Actually, Philly never made it there. Houston did, but lost. Both teams never won this tournament. But this is not a Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think Philly has been in the final. It doesn't matter. Anyway, yes, regardless, you got to look at those intangibles. That was my point. And certainly, yeah, you could make an argument for any of those teams. The one thing, I think you're more likely to see a out of the blue, unexpected, lower tier FA Cup winner because I think it just matters more. So they're going to be more willing to put especially if they're when the season starts in January and maybe they know, okay, we're pretty safe to stay up, so we can put our resources here and give our fans something to cheer for. It's like Stoke went to the final in 2011, right? Like you can see stuff like that happen. Wigan won.
That was a shock.
Team when they won. Yeah.
I think they were they still in the Premier League when they won? Yeah, they were. But they were relegated the same year.
After they'd been relegated.
Yeah, exactly. They've won the FA Cup after being relegated. Yeah, that's interesting. Speaking of the FA Cup, the FA Cup. Duane, who's going to win the FA Cup? And, it's going to be 2019. It's going to be spring 2019 when that happens. But who's winning the FA Cup?
I sort of spoke to this a minute ago. I'm pegging Arsenal to win this. A talented team that underachieved, obviously. There was so much drama around Wenger. We don't have to talk about the Wenger is out. # Wenger is out. I can't. Yeah, we already had the first Emery out tweets. There must have been someone's jokesters out there. But anyway, if not, I'm going to make sure that I get queued that up on kickoff at 3 o'clock before we're
after the first goal. # Emery out.
Exactly. So, I think that the motivation factor is there, and I do actually I like the Arsenal team too. I think they've been underachieving for a couple of years, and they might just because that pressure, that cloud's been lifted, it might allow them to excel. And it's a club that I shouldn't say that they haven't excelled in the past. They've won trophies. So there's like 90% of teams in football, 98% of teams in football would kill for Arsenal struggles for the past few years where they've won 2 FA Cups. So
that's true.
There you go.
Speaking of FA Cup winners and gunners, Bakary Sagna with the Montreal Impact. Make sure you watch the game versus Chicago next week to see the French international, former gunner, play for the Montreal Impact. But that's a bit of North American news that I wanted just to slip in because, well, Bakary Sagna just signed for my club. All right, now my winner of the FA Cup, Duane, it's a bit related to your disappointment of the season. You know, when a team is out of the contention of winning the league, even though they were expected to maybe be runner-up or even challenge for the Premier League trophy, there's another trophy you can win if you make it there, and that's the FA Cup. And I do feel Liverpool will win the FA Cup in 2019.
I mean, Liverpool to me they are the most interesting team in the Premier League this year because of their potential for explosiveness. So for sure, going to be a team that's going to be fascinating to watch throughout this season, and they could absolutely win. They could absolutely lose too. That's what I'll say about Liverpool, and what I have said about Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, now moving on to our European spots, and those will be in no particular order, so we don't spoil the rest of the show. So I'll go with mine. I do have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 7. So because Tottenham and Liverpool are my League Cup and FA Cup winners, so I've chosen 7 European spots in no particular order here. Spurs, Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, and Wolves will have European games in the other season after.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much have the same kind of thought process here because you can just replace Wolves and Fulham in my list, and there you go. That would obviously be a massive upset. West Ham's another team that I would peg for that bottom spot. Burnley's the one that claimed it last year, and they're actually doing okay in the Europa League Championship or qualifying. We didn't talk about qualifying at this point. They got a 0-0 draw on the road yesterday, and they're now a home win away from the Istanbul, that fourth team in Istanbul that they're playing in the Europa League, the team with orange that had Adebayor on it last year. I always butcher their name, so don't make me say it. Anyway, so it's
oh yeah, yeah, we're not gonna say
it's Baskashir, I believe, or something like that. Yeah,
so something like that.
Turkey.
The one team that starts with a B that doesn't have a Canadian in it. So let's put it that way.
It's the fourth team in Istanbul. Can you imagine have 4 teams in your city that are all in Europe because your league is all based out of the major city? Anyway,
and the rest of the league is not that good.
No run. It's good. Real quickly on this, I'm glad to see Burnley taking it seriously because I think that they realize that, and a lot of clubs didn't. I've seen a couple teams over the past few years that were sort of unexpectedly claiming Europa League spots, punting them in the qualifying. And I always just shook my head and wanted to reach through the computer screens and shake the managers because, for God's sakes, they were representing teams that will never get back to Europe, at least not in 10, 20, 30 years. Why the hell wouldn't you try? Yes, maybe you'll lose a couple positions in the league, but you're in Europe. Like, embrace it. And Burnley has, so thank God for that, at any rate. I picked Fulham.
And for me, Duane, Burnley has one of the most, well, I don't think he's underrated anymore, but at least he was one of the most underrated coach, I feel, in England, Sean Dyche, which I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years he actually gets promoted to a big club just because of his record, just because of his track record over the last few years. And yes, our Captain Canada is not with Burnley anymore. He went back to Rangers. Hello, Scott Arfield. We're counting on you for this upcoming Nations League qualifying games and next year's World Cup qualifying games. So yes, hello to Scott Arfield. But yeah, I do feel that Sean Dyche and Burnley are one of the underrated teams that you might be right. They could have a good European season if they make it to the Europa League proper. Now, let's move.
Yeah. Well, I haven't listed the rest of my teams. I think we
go ahead.
So
go ahead.
I in no particular order: Fulham, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, United, Chelsea, City. There you go. We mixed. We had six of the same 7, and then we flipped to two relegated or promoted teams. That were picking for upsets. We flipped them. So there you go.
Exactly. Now, number 7, the Golden Boot, and that choice has been influenced for me by those famous predictions of when you simulate with a computer program with algorithm, you simulate the entire season, and there's a few questions that are answered after those simulation, and a lot of people have simulated it on different platforms, and there's 3 names that come up often for those Golden Boot simulations. It's Hazard, Kane, Jesus, Gabriel Jesus, And, those three players, when I look at them, I'm like, yeah, but Aguero doesn't want to give up his spot. Jesus is going to have to battle Aguero for those playing time. This could lead to a few goals not have for both of them. So I do feel it's going to be between Eden Hazard and Harry Kane. Who is going to be able to win that race between the two? If you look at Chelsea, if you look at Tottenham, I'm leaning towards Hazard.
Well, and I went with Harry. So there you go. In terms of Jesus, he's made of glass. He'll be hurt halfway through the season. Don't kid yourselves. He will be. I've watched this guy closely. He's made of glass. So it's Aguero. It's not ideal. But that's City's Achilles heel.
And Duane just went into the ether. He should be back any moment. Hopefully Duane is back very soon. Connection with England has been...
Madrid.
There you go.
Line. Maybe he wants to do that, and he wants to put some big numbers up to prove that it's worthwhile. So.
Yeah, exactly. The connection is a bit iffy. We got Duane back at least. And let's finish the show with this one, Duane. The big question. We're all wondering what's going to happen. Who's going to win the league? Yeah, we're not. Everyone's saying the same damn thing. And I do feel that we are both saying the same team too. Manchester City back-to-back.
I mean, look, I wouldn't be on brand. Actually, I would be on brand if I didn't pick them to win, because I've done that before, because it's, quote unquote jinx or whatever. But they're too talented. They're too loaded. They had 100 points last year. It's very difficult to pick against them. If they were to lose, it will, maybe that's a better question. I didn't put it on the lineup, but maybe we'll just off the top of our head right now, because I am picking City to win. So I'm going to force you, Kevin, and myself to pick if City doesn't win, who is it? And do you think it's Liverpool or do you have someone else in mind?
I think it's Chelsea. Why? Not because I'm wearing a jersey of Chelsea right now. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a reason why. But I do feel that Sarri, the new coach of Chelsea, brings a different mentality to this club. Hazard will be motivated by proving himself. Alvaro Morata just had twins, changed his numbers. He wants to come back to the level he was at the beginning of the year last year. Some underappreciated signing in my mind for Chelsea, Jorginho, and Kepa is going to be a good keeper too. Bye-bye Thibaut, with your one flub a game, I'm kind of happy you went back to Madrid. It's funny how Thibaut Courtois used to hate Real Madrid, and the first chance he gets, goes back there. Okay, fine. His wife is there and his kids is there. That's why he's going back to Madrid, just on the other side of Madrid. But I do feel that Chelsea, with the new manager, if things go the way they should with Sarri, they have a shot. But a lot of things need to go right for them to surpass City in this race.
I actually have Chelsea pegged. I'll put my 1 to 20 listing out on Twitter as soon as the show's over, as I said. But I actually have Chelsea pegged at second, but I don't think they're the team that would nick them. And for that, I hate to say it, it's going to kill me to say it, but I would actually pick United.
United.
And the reason I would is it has to do just with styles. It's styles. I think that if United has the potential to completely grind the title race out, to get like a whole bunch of 1-0s. They have that ability within them. They are an incredibly solid defensive team. They went, 3 months without allowing a goal last year. That is something that I think might allow them to shut down a team like they beat City last year too. So it might allow them to shut the bigger teams down, and as long as they get the points against the weaker teams, then absolutely I think that they have the chance. I'm picking City. I don't think they'll have 100 points this year. I think that they'll be in the 90s, but if I had to pick a second team, it's not Liverpool, because they're too unpredictable to me. Although they are the most explosive team still in that mix. Arsenal's in a rebuild. Spurs, I don't know. It's hard to imagine Spurs winning a title. They had that chance when Leicester won. That was Spurs' year.
That was their chance, and Chelsea said no, and that was hilarious.
Yeah, so that they're the only other team really in the mix there that you could potentially make an argument for a title race. I think that the title race will get more interesting in about a year. City's going to still build, and they're going to be up to the top for a long time. But I do think that the Chelsea, United, Arsenal, we're all kind of going through a bit of a a rethink, particularly United and Arsenal, and I think we're still another year away from that fully bearing fruit. So, and I think in United's case, Mourinho apologists will have to forgive me here. I think that they're going to need a manager change for them to get to the next level at this point. I think Mourinho has sort of ceilinged out. So that's where I'm there. But Chelsea to win.
It's not 20
or Chelsea City to win.
Yeah, City is going to win. We all know that, and they're going to win in like April or something. So we'll see if that happens. If you're just discovering us because of the Premier League and the preview show, make sure you follow us on social media at Soccer Today SPN for the show. Make sure you subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts. Just look for Soccer Today or the Sports Podcast Network on all your different platforms. Hit the subscribe button. It really helps us a lot. And downloads our show. It really helps us a lot going forward as well. And if you like the YouTube aspect, if you like the video aspect, you can subscribe at youtube.com/sports podcast network. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. That way you will know as soon as we go live Monday to Friday on most weeks. You will have that notification on your devices, and you can listen and look at our beautiful voices and our beautiful faces. And until next time, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, myself at Kevin Laramee. We'll be back Monday with our first weekend review with some Premier League, mostly Major League Soccer, but both of them mixed together. It's that time of year where we give time to both leagues, because both leagues in our mind deserve it for different reasons, obviously, but both leagues do deserve our time. Duane, have a good Premier League weekend. And until Monday, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.